Dear teachers and students, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's lecture, everyone. Now, please allow me to introduce the speaker for today's lecture. He authored Tales for Transforming Adversity and Achieve by Doing. He has written many best-selling books. He is a Khenpo who strives to convey the truths of life to people in a modern way. As a monastic Khenpo, he is not satisfied with practicing alone in seclusion in a cave. His wish is to offer some inspiration on how to break free from suffering and find joy for those who are lost. Khenpo often says that Buddhism is a kind of spiritual science. Its wisdom awaits those who are destined to discover it. Please applaud to welcome Khenpo Sodargye, who will deliver a very interesting and wonderful lecture on the micromorality for us.
Today, let us take a thoughtful moment to explore together the topic of the micro-era, micro-morality, a subject that has become increasingly relevant in our rapidly changing world. I think everyone here should be quite aware at this particular point in time, by now, as we all know, that each of us present is holding a smartphone in our hands. In fact, it can be directly explained that we are like tiny microorganisms, small and almost invisible, existing and living in the micro-era. Perhaps that's a bit of an exaggeration, but honestly, I often find myself thinking about it. Nowadays, we increasingly have no time of our own, no space of our own, and no wisdom of our own. Much of it is, in fact, dominated by a wide variety of other forms of junk culture, or by all kinds of information such as opinions, suggestions that we receive from other people, which can influence and even control the way we think and make decisions. In this era, we all absolutely need to fully and clearly, without any doubt, recognize each person personally throughout their life journey. In their living experience, how do we truly face our own lives, as well as all of our problems and challenges? And everything, all the events and experiences that will eventually happen to us in the future. Of course, everyone here should already be aware. It is clear that the current time is different from before. It has really become a completely new era. People call it the micro era. Why is it called the micro era? Now, as we look around, we have micro movies, WeChat, Weibo, micro interviews, micro novels, and so on. All these micro innovations are everywhere. You know, there are so many incredibly subtle things. Some people say that micro actually simply means something subtle or tiny. Others say that micro now, in certain respects, actually means that we have become creators, disseminators, and original sources of all information that is shared, distributed, or made available to others. At this point, we can't help but recall that indeed our lives are most certainly somewhat different from those of people in the past. In the past, when people read a book, perhaps a favorite one, they truly actually had the time for it. They would finish reading it within just a few days. But now, while reading a book, people might be bombarded with all kinds of information. At the same time, you have to keep on scrolling, continuously sending messages, and also replying to other people. All sorts of situations can occur. Every day, our time is controlled by this fragmented culture. As a result, many of the thoughts in people's minds today are not very complete, thorough, and comprehensive. Unlike in the past, when they had a certain clearly defined fixed wholeness, but that's simply no longer the case as it once was. Including myself as a Buddhist, as a monk, personally, before I started using these things, to be honest, I used to spend a lot more time reciting scriptures every single day. I would read books one by one. But later, I realized from observing my own life that if I don't control my time now, it's very likely that every day I won't be able to finish the daily scriptures I need to recite or complete my daily practices. And the scriptures and treatises to translate may not finish. At this point, I clearly realize that it's not just me, it's not only myself, but many people around us, in fact, have minds that have become much richer than before. However, at the same time, our thoughts have also become more complicated. What kind of thinking paradigm are we truly operating within each and every day at this time? I'm afraid that many of you teachers and students here have also experienced something similar. For example, people in today's fast-paced world especially like to use short periods of time in their daily lives to get the shortest piece of information in the fastest, most direct, and easiest way. That's why people now really like to make micromovies. So what are the characteristics of micromovies? They use microtime, which means anywhere from 30 seconds to about 1 minute, 2 minutes, or up to 5 minutes. A complete movie can be presented within this time frame. And in the production process, it involves micro investment, meaning the investment is very small, just a couple thousand to several thousand yuan. It's also micro production with a very short production time as well. It can be completed in a day or within a week to produce them. Just think about it if it were really another type of film, like a big screen or feature-length movie. How much investment, how much time, and how much production would that actually require? None of that is necessary. People often prefer to watch these kinds of movies. Besides movies, we now often have conversations about microblogs, especially those found on popular social media platforms. You can use up to 140 characters at a time in order to clearly explain something. In that process, it can also become a micro novel, just 140 characters. In the past, when you read a novel, whether it's Dream of the Red Chamber or Romance of the Three Kingdoms, they take a very long time to read. Now, in just a short amount of time, you can read a micro novel. Besides this, there are also micro interviews. For example, on the Weibo platform in particular, within a short period of just 1 hour. You can have dozens to thousands of questions at any given time, allowing for interactive engagement and thoughtful responses. As a Buddhist, I have also used these, but while using them, I also discovered both its advantages and disadvantages, the good and bad aspects. What are the disadvantages? Because on many of our current platforms, there actually isn't, unfortunately, a very good or effective filtering. Everyone in the entire world has the complete freedom to express any thought at any time, randomly and spontaneously. There isn't, in general, a rigorous or particularly strict review process, nor is there any real filtering at all. In this kind of situation, once these ideas are posted, it's very possible that sometimes, in fact, especially regarding many phenomena in society, it isn't actually the truth. But once it's exposed, after it's revealed, in fact, it actually becomes a kind of fault attributed to these people. For example, some negative information about people that's posted on Weibo these days, I often feel that, in fact, these people are also really being wronged. But there's nothing that can be done once it's posted. Nowadays, people especially like to share things that are sensational or provocative. In this way, thousands upon thousands of these get shared in a very short period of time. In the end, this already becomes accepted as the truth. Originally, everyone believed that any matter in the world actually has three sides. There's your side, my side, and then the actual truth of the matter itself. It's very possible that at some point during our communication or judgment process, my side carries my own subjective bias, and your side also has your subjectivity. But the real truth of the matter very likely hasn't even been uncovered by anyone yet. Originally, understanding the truth of many things needed this kind of judgment to be sufficient. At this point in time, the phenomenon that we currently refer to as micromedia, which describes small-scale, individualized media platforms and has become an important public platform in our society. As everyone knows, in the past, so-called news always had to be carefully reviewed and then officially approved by the relevant authorities. But what has it become now? Now, everyone is a news creator, a publisher, and a promoter. Whatever ideas he has, he simply writes them down, and after writing, he publishes them. Once it's published, People all over the world, both at home and abroad, everyone up and down the social ladder all know about it. The speed at which this information spreads is also incredibly fast. Sometimes I observe and compare information from abroad and from within the country. In just a few short seconds, almost instantly, whoosh, it appears. If the information you share genuinely encourages people to do good and is full of positive energy, such information, you could say, is actually very meaningful. This is something that, compared to the past, is a real advantage of modern communication. However, there are also the majority of people, particularly some of us today, who always harbor a sense of resentment in their hearts. They're dissatisfied with society, and human relationships are very poor. They see the entire world as a dark and hopeless place, viewing everything around them as shrouded in darkness. People like this are, in many cases, often quite articulate individuals. They seem to speak so convincingly, and such people take certain things in society, even things that aren't actually negative, and turn them into something negative when they talk about them. Whether for individuals or for society as a whole, this leaves everyone with a lingering sense of disappointment. Why is it nowadays when some media or posts on Weibo come out, something that originally wasn't that serious, but everyone feels that now it seems that in this world, there isn't a single truly good person left, and the world is completely full of evil people? This kind of mentality develops. I think this is also quite strongly related to some of our various platforms, especially those that we use very often on a daily basis, particularly microblogging platforms. This is a negative phenomenon, and starting from now, I think, as I mentioned earlier, each and every one of us should be considered not only as a creator of news and information, but also, importantly, as a participant. Since you are a master, your friends, circle, and Weibo group, within these communities, we have our own right to speak and to act each and every time. At this point, we really should start with ourselves and address these negative phenomena. We should try our best to correct them. So how do we go about correcting them? First, we are in such diverse thoughts and complex circumstances. We need to have wisdom and awareness. We must be able to distinguish what is good and what is not. We must discern what is true or false, right or wrong, good or evil. We need wisdom, including both worldly and transcendent knowledge. With this kind of wisdom, we can all truly make these important distinctions. Once we notice certain public opinions or phenomena from others are not beneficial to society or to individuals, then whether it concerns ourselves or others, we should try to stop it. I know someone who has been studying and practicing Buddhism to some extent, but he really isn't what you would call a genuine or authentic Buddhist practitioner. And sometimes he says he's a Buddhist, other times he says he's not. Can't tell myself. I've heard that every day, whether it's on Weibo, his blog, or WeChat. Most of the content he posts is pretty trivial, just about eating and drinking. Of course, a lot of people really like this kind of thing. Many people certainly do. Because if Buddhism is seen as an academic field, people interested in this area might only partially engage certain aspects of it. And if it's about art, only those who are interested in art would pay attention. But if we simply talk about eating and drinking, why are certain books and certain advertisements so incredibly popular in our modern world these days? The reason is that people can't live without eating and drinking. People are especially fond of all kinds of dishes from the north, south, east, and west, how to eat, how to drink. It doesn't matter if you're wise or foolish. From the northeast or the south, everyone shares this interest. This is something everyone can relate to. But some people, often when they post, it is like the person I mentioned earlier. What kinds of things does he usually or most often post about in general? Oh, today I went to a dog meat restaurant. The dog meat was excellent. Tomorrow I'll go somewhere to eat seafood. Seafood here is great, and it's excellent there too. Later, many people talked to me about it, so I spoke to this person. I said, since you like to post, besides seafood, there are others too. If you post the seafood here is great on Weibo, of course, a lot of other people will absolutely rush there to eat seafood like crazy. Actually, as for the seafood, if someone doesn't understand the value of life for whatever reason, I won't judge them. But if you understand that they also have feelings, then just through a single Weibo post from you, think about how many lives are killed that day, how many precious lives are lost because of it. At this point, I would like to offer advice to everyone whenever we post any kind of information online or share it anywhere. So in the meanwhile, one should also think carefully, observe, and reflect on the words I speak out. It is whether my words benefit everyone or just me in this lifetime, and it's beneficial or harmful to my future lives. I think this is extremely crucial, and it is also a way for us to change a negative environment. Whenever anyone in any given situation who speaks or does things, ultimately they should be personally responsible for themselves and take accountability. You have a certain responsibility. If your actions are not taken responsibly with care for how they might affect others in the situation around you, perhaps in the future, both in this life and the next, you will face serious consequences. Some people may not necessarily acknowledge these consequences, but whether you admit it, in reality, it is a true law of nature. I remember in the Buddhist scriptures, in a text called the Collection of the Six Perfection Sutra, it is mentioned that there was once a young prince, the beloved son of a wise and noble king, who from a very early age did not speak at all. Even at the age of 13, he still did not speak, and those around him thought he was mute. This was considered detrimental to the royal lineage, so they decided to bury him alive. After that, they realized that he could speak. He said, "Actually, I didn't dare to speak because I can recall my past life. When I remember my past life, I realized that due to carelessness, I was originally a good prince and always practiced virtuous deeds. But one time, because I was careless with my word, when many guests were present, my assistant at the time said, 'Today, with so many guests here, should we kill many animals to impress?' At that time, I had already agreed and just said one word. Okay. Those two words, okay, truly caused me to later suffer in hell for countless eons. Afterwards, for 0 years, I endured the pain of killing. Now, thanks to special circumstances, I have remembered my past life. I now feel that because of my careless words back then, I have already fallen into an abyss. Now, I am extremely afraid, and this is also why I believe that silence is golden. He spoke like this, which made me think that sometimes we truly do cause very frightening consequences with our own words. Therefore, I would sincerely like to take this opportunity to strongly encourage every one of you here that in all of our future lives, because everyone is using these micro-era, micro-platforms nowadays, and no one can control this. Nor is it necessary for us to return to ancient times in any way, or to the 20th century, 19th century, all the way back to ancient societies. This is something we can't change now. Humanity has already progressed to where we are today, and there's no way around it. But it is indeed very necessary for each of us to carefully observe our own words and actions in our daily lives. That's one important thing that I really wanted to mention. Another point I'd like to bring up is when we spread micro-knowledge to wider audiences in the future, what kind of effective dissemination strategies do we need to implement? It should include knowledge and content that is beneficial and helpful, not only to all living beings in the world, but also to ourselves as individuals, supporting our growth. This is extremely important in the present context, and it should, without a doubt, be very important for everyone. On this point, I want to say that Buddhism truly plays a significant role in encouraging good deeds and stopping evil. Especially when it comes to adjusting people's mindsets, it has a tremendous impact. Yesterday, I met some teachers from Tianjin, and they were also saying, in our current era, we need some education, imparting positive energy. Sometimes when we look at today's college students, for example, they should feel very honored having been admitted to prestigious schools in the world. In our society, so many people have not been admitted, and so many people envy them. When students have already been admitted to such good schools, they still often experience unhappiness, confusion, and anxiety in some universities. In the end, some people even have time to write a suicide note. Some people don't even have time to write a suicide note before jumping to their deaths. There are even cases in some schools where people plan together and jump from the same floor at the same time, just like diving into a pool. This kind of phenomenon is happening in many places nowadays. Actually, when we see such things in our lives, if from a young age we truly received an education in kindness, I truly believe many of these precious lives would not be needlessly lost over such insignificant matters. So I want to say, after talking to many students and teachers, this is something very much needed. Everyone should always respect their own life and also respect the lives of others with care and consideration. Life is extremely precious, but why don't we understand its value? This is somewhat related to the ideas and information around us in various ways in different contexts. Maybe it's because so many young people these days frequently listen to pop songs throughout their daily life. I don't really understand them at all, but when others are singing pop songs, and a lot of the content in pop songs seems to be strongly related to emotional attachments and feelings. And many of these emotional attachments don't talk about the more positive or uplifting aspects. A lot of the more famous popular songs in contemporary music are often about some kind of personal failure or emotional struggle. In the end, they're especially painful, truly despairing. People really like lyrics like these for some reason. If you keep reciting these, keep singing these songs over and over again, like monastics recite Amitabha Buddha, many of you young people often like these kinds of songs. When you actually encounter some difficulties in your own life, you tend to start applying the content of those lyrics to your reality. You can't resist or escape from the situation. This is actually related to our current culture to some extent. What I hope then, if a ray of pure Dharma light from Buddhism gently illuminates your inner consciousness, all these problems would be easily resolved. In fact, things aren't really like that. Whether you no longer have any status, or even if you still do have it, in the end, it really doesn't matter at all because it makes no real difference. In Buddhism, it is said that all phenomena are impermanent and should be accepted as they come and go. Maybe you used to have money and social status, but now you don't. I heard about a professor from Peking University who said that one of his classmates, back when they were students, was, without a doubt, in fact, truly the object of great admiration and envy among all the other students. Why? Because at that time, there were hardly any luxury cars in China. But he was often picked up and dropped off in a Mercedes, which made everyone very envious. Because his family, in fact, had an exceptionally strong background, notably so. Later, after he graduated from university, he started his own family and career. People continued to envy him greatly, but eventually, after some time, something happened. His father was either arrested or something else happened. And when trouble struck, all his relatives and friends left him, and he could no longer find any of them anywhere. In this situation, his wife also took their child and went abroad along with him. At that time, he became extremely distraught, and during that period of his life, he ended up committing suicide. Because back in university and during his childhood, he was especially cheerful and radiant. He never truly experienced so-called pain, pressure, or discrimination from others in many aspects. But suddenly, all these insults and rumors from others and all kinds of suffering and hardship hit him all at once, and in that moment he just simply couldn't handle it at all. In Buddhist teachings, we say that everything is fundamentally impermanent. If you often take time to thoughtfully reflect on this profound truth of impermanence, especially while you are still studying and learning, including some song lyrics, I think about them too. Oh, and many young people nowadays, there are also some negative lyrics in songs.
all kinds of songs that you like to sing these days. Songs about pain, excitement, anxiety, and failure. It's fine if you want to sing those too. But in Buddhism, as we understand it, everything follows conditions. Everything eventually departs. Everything will leave you. At such difficult and challenging times, how can I relax, feel at ease, be pure, joyful, and happy, and so on? What can I actually do? If these Buddhist teachings, principles, and words are thoughtfully and carefully applied in our lives when we are young, even just a little, perhaps you will encounter many different things in life, but when you face them, your mindset will be different from others. Many Buddhists I have personally met over the years, from different backgrounds, actually, Buddhism is not exactly the kind of spiritual education system that most people think it is today in modern society. So Buddhism, it's a religion, but not in that way. In my view, and from my experience, Buddhism should definitely be considered a very good and profound form of comprehensive spiritual education and personal development. If, when we are young, in this modern digital micro era, there is some widespread dissemination of knowledge and wisdom. This is a kind of micro-morality. What is micro-morality? Micro-morality means each of us actively spreads virtuous morals and good ethical values to others in our daily lives and communities. There is a very important saying in Buddhism, one that is often quoted and remembered from the ancient Buddhist scripture, Sutra on the Wise and Foolish, a classic text that distinguishes between wise and foolish behavior, offering valuable guidance and moral lessons that remain relevant today. In this particular ancient scripture, there is a line that says, "Do not think that small sins and minor transgressions are harmless and treat them lightly, for even a tiny, seemingly insignificant spark can burn down grass as vast as mountains, consuming everything in its wake." You can also look up this line online to find its actual meaning and deeper philosophical significance, and learn it yourself through independent study and reflection if you want. I might not recite perfectly, but what does it mean? It means that when it comes to minor misdeeds or small wrongdoings, we shouldn't think that just because they are minor, it does not mean it's acceptable by any means whatsoever to start committing them. That is simply not reasonable. In our words, actions and attitudes, whether in speech, mindset, or behavior, anything that is truly harmful to ourselves or to others, everyone knows, do not do to others what you would not want done to yourself. So any actions that you yourself dislike or that are harmful to you, try your best not to do them. Because you might think, this is just a small thing. What's harm in stealing small things? What's the big deal, a few rude words? Nowadays, many people's language is impure, their hearts are impure, even their expressions are impure. If you think these little things don't matter, gradually, it's like a tiny spark that, as it grows bigger and bigger, can set an entire haystack as big as a mountain ablaze in an instant, consuming everything in its path. This is a very apt metaphor. Therefore, in our daily lives, as we go about our routines, do not do evil just because it seems even minor, and do not neglect good just because it seems small. This means we should not think we can do something wrong just because the evil is very small. And we shouldn't refrain from doing good, even if it seems insignificant, simply because every good act matters. Don't think that there's no merit in it. Don't think that way. In the scripture passage I mentioned earlier, which is part of the discussion we're having, there is also another important point that comes up later in the text. It says, "Do not think that small good deeds are meaningless and treat them lightly." Don't underestimate a small good deed. For example, saying a kind and thoughtful word, offering a smile, or helping an elderly person, or sharing a positive message on social media every day. And do not think that only one small deed, just because it doesn't seem to bring much benefit to you or to others, you really shouldn't look down on it. Do not think that small good deeds are useless and treat them lightly, for water drops, when accumulated, gradually fill a great vessel, it just mentioned in the previous sutra. Which means the idea is that drop by drop, one drop of water after another, and eventually the whole big pot starts to overflow. So, when it comes to our actions, we should start by changing the small things. Gently correct some of those small, everyday bad habits and make sure to do even the tiniest, most meaningful good deeds. In this way, little by little, you will gradually become a truly outstanding person. Therefore, in this micro-era, I always feel that our actions in different ways, it is for each and every one of us is truly, in many ways, our own teacher and those around us. In our surroundings and environment, there are actually quite a number of truly good people who bring warmth and hope to others. Once you have the intention in this regard, sometimes maybe a small, simple post you make on social media could eventually become something truly significant and meaningful. Small, winding streams flowing steadily over time eventually form a vast and mighty ocean. Ultimately, these small, gentle streams can gradually become a vast sea of goodness. This is indeed possible. For example, some time ago, there was the well-known dog meat festival held in Guangxi. Every year, during the controversial dog meat festival, countless innocent dogs are brutally killed and slaughtered, resulting in the tragic and unnecessary loss of the being lives. But later, after a few dedicated individuals started a campaign on Weibo that gained widespread support, the festival was eventually cancelled. For people who truly believe in cherishing and valuing animal life, for gentle, kind-hearted, and compassionate people, of course, this is a very significant thing. For example, we humans are killing every day. Recently, in the news, there are certain countries planning to execute many people. Actually, we feel that killing people is terrifying. But when it comes to killing animals, in our habits, it doesn't seem scary at all. It's just that we do not have sufficient awareness or genuine understanding of the preciousness and value of life in this regard. There's also the free lunch initiative started by Deng Fei and others. This has also benefited many children in Western regions, and it seems that later, at the time, it was just a brief social media post, and after it was sent, it has now become a truly significant major charitable movement. It has already become like this, so sometimes, in today's world, an ordinary person can quite literally become a millionaire almost overnight through social media or cryptocurrency. This is also a feature of the micro-era, which means you can become a celebrity overnight. Many people don't have much wisdom or ability, but if you just make a strange face or do something unusual on camera, it could go viral and transform your life. Or say something that resonates with people's emotions and strikes a chord with millions, and instantly became famous. So our current era has its advantages, but also its downsides. So throughout this process, I've always felt that if you have the right conditions and intentions from all sides, you should also explore some of the virtuous concepts and wisdom that Buddhism offers for personal growth and inner peace. As for myself, I have racked my brains studying this for nearly 30 years, but throughout the research process, to speak very fairly, I truly feel that it is beneficial and helpful for our lives. Some people say that Buddhism has many negative influences and is not necessarily good. That might be the case. This kind of misunderstanding has always existed. And I would also like to briefly address this issue here with everyone. Many of the current negative views or misunderstandings about Buddhism, especially in modern times, it is related to some extent and connected to certain individual phenomena and behavioral patterns we observe among us. This is not a problem with Buddhism itself. It should be said that it is somewhat related to Buddhists and our environment. First of all, let's talk about the Buddhist right now. Many Buddhists probably don't really understand the essence of Buddhism itself. As a result, Buddhism has already become a kind of superficial image. Nowadays, in many temples, there are often promoted practices like burning the first incenses or striking the first bell that have become popular during festivals. At the very first second of the new year, whoever manages to strike that bell with their own hand, right at that very exact moment in time, that's tens of thousands and even more than that. Whoever burns the biggest incense stick, which can cost hundreds of thousands. These things have already become commercialized in many situations or are purely for show nowadays. Whenever people mention temples or Buddhism, it's always about burning incense and worshipping Buddha. But that's just an image, and this particular image, as you can see, is entirely worldly in its nature. It's the behavior of people who truly lack wisdom and depth, just like folk customs. Of course, in Buddhism, is there incense burning and Buddha worship? Yes. But whenever Buddhism is mentioned, I often encounter situations where, even at the airport, when some children see me, oh, Amitabha, they think that people like us who wear these robes, they think you are only know to chant Amitabha. Or you may just burn a single stick of incense. That's all there is to it. But that's not true. The teachings are actually profound. So some Buddhists have turned Buddhism into a superficial image. That's one reason. There's also another reason. Nowadays, for all sorts of reasons, many Buddhist temples have gradually become increasingly commercialized, and it is all about the money. Tourist attractions like famous landmarks, open scenic spots, and ticket sales are all closely linked to commercial interests and economic activities. No matter which Buddhist temple or places you go to, you can't achieve spiritual purification, you just end up giving some money. That's why, in different settings, we also call for the following. Our Buddhist temples should not, under any circumstance whatsoever, be selling tickets. Ticket selling began in the 1970s and 1980s when a few temples began doing it in order to restore their buildings. In Tibetan regions, even in precious Buddhist sites, there are no such situation. If anyone who has faith can visit the temples. This commercialization is actually the reason why many Buddhist temples have become commercialized. This also leads to a kind of misunderstanding among people, and there is yet another misunderstanding. Some Buddhists now are also turning Buddhism into a form of entertainment, or even vulgarizing and commercializing it in ways that diminish its spiritual essence. In many Buddhist communities, it is common for groups to form teams that sing and dance together, especially during religious festivals, ceremonies, or community gatherings. Some monasteries in Tibet even invite celebrities for consecration ceremonies these days, or when holding certain rituals, they often invite many famous actors and singers. But monastery consecration is not something to be done by celebrities or singers. I don't admire this practice. Maybe later this might also happen in Han regions. At present, it seems that this hasn't been heard of in Han areas. But in the future, celebrities, singers, and entertainers in Han regions and may cordially invited to the temple for the consecration ceremony. But in reality, Buddhists are not, of course. Does Buddhism have these things? If they exist, that's possible, but they are not the mainstream thinking. If this continues, then Buddhism will gradually, just as I mentioned earlier, become commercialized, turned into forms of entertainment, and focus primarily on outward appearances and spectacle. These trends will slowly push Buddhism to the margins, and marginalization means it is no longer mainstream thought. Buddhism is turning into this kind of image. This is the situation in Han regions and, to a lesser extent, in Tibetan regions. This is, in fact, actually one of the very significant root causes of the public's misunderstanding of Buddhism. I believe that the true spiritual core values of Buddhism, which serve as the foundation of its teachings and practices, are essential guiding. So it is found in profound wisdom and the great compassion. Profound wisdom and genuine great compassion are both important forms of education in our lives. In genuine Buddhist practice, including certain forms of meditation, years of dedicated listening, careful contemplation, and thoughtful, in-depth study are comparable to university-level courses. Therefore, in Tibetan Buddhism, the educational model of monasteries since ancient times is now completely aligned with many educational models and teaching methodologies of Western schools. So, in this way, I truly believe that everyone should be able to fully understand and genuinely appreciate, in their own way, the positive side of Buddhism. In this particular context, today I also want to just take a moment to discuss with everyone here about whether it is studying Buddhism or believing in other religions. All of these are entirely matters of personal freedom. Whenever I visit a school, I never require them to have faith or to study these things. Absolutely not. Everyone's lives, affinities are different. However, each of us needs to face life. And in the process of facing life for ourselves, it should be one's own heart that needs some kind of support and reliance when we face any matters in our lives. This is not just about relying on other people. Yourself needs something to lean on, especially during times in your life. Nowadays, many young people seem to think that relationships with friends or others are just transactions. They believe if I treat you well, you should treat me well. If I treat you with 5% kindness, then you should at least really treat me with 7% or even 10% in return. If you don't give me 7% or 10% or you treat me poorly, at the very least, I shouldn't be at a loss. There must be at least 5% in return. Why do I treat you with that 5% kindness? What's the reason? It's because I'm attached to you, because I invest in you. But actually, from a Buddhist perspective, each of us is an independent, unique, individual being. We come and go alone, are born and die alone. That's exactly what the Buddhist scriptures say. When we come into this world, we come alone. No one can help us. There's nothing that can be done about it. When we die, we also leave this world, in the end, relying on our own karma. So we are all individuals born alone, die alone, come and go alone. I am truly completely separate from others, and even my karma is different from theirs. Personalities differ. Every person has a unique personality. So it seems like many of young people insist that others must share their interests and think the same way they do. They try to impose their way of thinking on others. But this is difficult. So many young people have issues with relationships and emotions. This also explains the conflicts and friction that often occur between colleagues in the workplace. If we understand that, according to Buddhism, every sentient being is different. Not overnight, like this, since beginningless time. I often see when some families argue at home, people say, oh, they shouldn't be arguing, but why is that? In fact, arguments are usually, most of the time, about things that are actually very simple and straightforward, nothing major at all. Because the things that happen at home, compared to national or international affairs, are definitely trivial matters. And when family members argue, I've never seen them argue over any truly significant family issues. It seems there really aren't any, and often it's just some very minor things among family members. Maybe it's because of something you said. For example, you said something that didn't seem quite right, actually. It didn't sound entirely appropriate. In Buddhist logic, when we debate, your language must be absolutely, completely flawless in every possible way without ever leaving any gaps for others to exploit. But in normal family conversations, it's impossible for everything you say to be absolutely perfect, really leaving absolutely no room at all for misunderstanding. If there isn't slightest gap, it's impossible to speak. But nowadays, many people feel that what the other person says doesn't really reach their heart. It didn't meet my requirements and didn't meet my mentality. So they end up arguing endlessly. That's why sometimes now, in this micro era, I feel that I see many people experiencing significant pain, and the root cause of this pain is micromorality. The subtle principles of micromorality have not really been understood. As a result, it seems that a lot of deep emotional pain often arises and truly develops in our hearts as well. Actually, in life, we should have a good way of living, which means developing healthy habits and taking care of both our body and mind. Of course, if we ever happen to experience any kind of physical illness, or perhaps face severe financial hardship or difficulty in our lives at some point, these situations can be very difficult to face. But in general, most of us should be able to handle a lot of ordinary circumstances which can happen in our lives, and without any doubt. That's why I often say that in this micro era, everyone should, as much as possible, have a smile. A smile is actually a gentle, radiant light of wisdom from the heart. A smile on my face brings warmth to others and makes them feel comfortable. A genuine smile can brighten moods and create connection, even briefly. When we speak with a smile, it really makes others feel truly happy inside. But if I speak with a deeply troubled and pained expression, on one hand, it affects my mood and my physical health, and it also impacts my lifespan, my career, my work, and many other aspects. When my mindset is negative, I lose interest in everything, including eating and even sleeping. Even my dreams become nightmares. This is, in the end, the way we ultimately end up living. But if I adjust my mindset and my heart becomes calm and clear, a smile naturally appears on my face. When I have a smile on my face, I won't have many wrinkles and I won't age quickly. My mood will be good, I'll sleep well, and even my dreams will be pleasant ones. Therefore, in our daily lives, we constantly and consciously need to adjust and readjust ourselves. If we don't make these adjustments, life becomes a complicated journey and one of continually and often inevitably facing pain and complex problems. Some people, like many college students, think, when will I graduate? After graduation, I can start a family and get a job. But in reality, work and family only increase life's pressures. Right now, things are easy and you really just need to study. When you become an adult, some adults often start thinking, when can I retire? But retirement also brings a sense of loss. I believe that our mindset is the most important thing. Ideally, our mindset should truly involve the act of giving to others as well as a genuine and heartfelt sense of altruism. In Buddhism, the concept of altruism is emphasized. We're not talking helping others. From our own perspective, having a genuinely altruistic heart brings us tremendous benefits and enriches our own lives significantly. Therefore, I hope that in these subtle times, we should mindfully practice subtle virtuous deeds and small acts of kindness. In this way, subtle causes and conditions will also naturally arise in our own lives. All right, thank you everyone. I finished my today's talk.